Hello everyone, my name is Samantha Grimes and I am doing my case study on UnitedHealth Group. Now they weren't always called UnitedHealth Group. When they first came into existence, they were only known as UnitedHealth Care. But this was when they first came into being back in 1977. Now, in 1997, when they were a publicly traded company, they became UnitedHealth Group because they had also branched out into 4 different segments. And one of these segments was UnitedHealth Care, which is the expression, bread and butter of their entire business, because that is their health insurance sector. That is where most of the programs are that help people manage health and making sure that they are able to make payments on their health care. But the other 3 that I am talking about is Optum Health, Optum Health, Optum Insight, and Optum RX, because they have, and still do, have a strategic alliance with CVS. But in their history, they did have their own privately owned pharmacy sector, but it was sold off for $15 billion, and we can only conclude that at this point in time it was not working for them, and so they decided to cut ties with having their own pharmacy section and decided to branch out into a company that already had that established successfully. Now, one of the strategic possibilities that did come into being was the changing of CEOs, even though they were not having a problem. The reason I say that is because back in 2007, there was a problem where the former CEO of the company had not paid dividends and was neglecting his position and was at fault for giving a bad reputation for UnitedHealth Group. So when they chose a new CEO, they made sure that that lawsuit was taken care of. And it was. And so their stock prices went back up, their popularity came back up. So when I was reading about them switching CEOs again, I had to wonder whether this was a strategic move or if it was something that they had to do. But it was more strategic than what you might think, because the one Stephen Hemsley, who is no longer CEO as of September 1st of this year, was doing very well. He was keeping it going. He was praised for being very well managed, and so that was not the problem. And actually, there was no problem. They just found that it would be beneficial if they gave someone on the board a chance to see the company in a new light and bring about just a fresher change, a fresher insight on what needs to get done for the company. And so that's why David Wichmann came into being the new CEO as of, like I said, September 1st. Now, he used to be the executive chair of board of directors, but now that he's taken over CEO, ironically, Stephen Hemsley actually took over his position. So they pretty much just swapped positions so that different management can be seen at a different person's perspective. Now, the rest of the board, you will find that a lot of these are all very high-ranking officials that have involvement throughout the entire UnitedHealth Group sectors. Kind of a good example would be that their chief executive officer of Optum is also the vice chairman of the board of directors. So him being part of that sector and giving an insight on that sector has proven to be beneficial to make sure that that part of the company is still being brought into perspective. Now, to talk about some other things that have been going on, there has been a change with a contract. The United States military, they have a insurance program called TRICARE, and the ones that were handling the insurance was UnitedHealth Group. But in recent years, and as of November 10th, they have actually pulled out of the contract that they've had with UnitedHealth Group. And so essentially UnitedHealth Group just lost a very large contract that they had, which is a double-edged sword, because I'm noticing that even though they lost this contract, and they did have to lay off 381 jobs in their Phoenix, Arizona location, you flip over to the other side of the problem, and strategically, they're trying to stay connected with military service members by holding a job fair and recruiting their goal is to recruit 1,000 United States military personnel as employees as well as their spouses. So they want to still show that they support the military, but they still lost the contract. And because they lost these positions at their Phoenix location, some people are trying to figure out if this was strategically correct to try to hire military members, even though you just essentially lost 381 people their job. But they have been taking their time with these layoffs, and they have tried to make sure that these employees that they have had to let go have had an opportunity to look for another position to keep them at a steady income. So there's our second strategy. CEO change, which I agree gives a fresh image. The second one, dealing with a crisis that could have ended very badly if they weren't going to handle it correctly. But in terms of another strategic handling of the times in general, they have been trying to implement a new technology development program. Now, it's not very new. It's a few years old, but it is very innovative because they are always pushing that they are a lead insurance company because they are able to provide services in many different ways because of their technology. And when looking at these programs that they've been mentioning, it just gives us perspective that they're branching out. They're trying to make sure that their programs are able to keep up with the new clients that come in, because they have very high standards for excellence, for making sure that management is done correctly. And a way that they have shown that they have been branching out to make sure that they keep up with how the world in general is going to be needing healthcare, they have gone international, and they do have they have launched a strategic alliance with trying to provide some Middle East sectors with healthcare programs. And one of the locations that I have researched on was Dubai. And they have, basically their goal is to make sure that these employees in Dubai have access to quality healthcare, because that is their goal, is to make sure that everyone can have access to quality healthcare. And because of recent talk about the medical insurance reforms, they have been running to speed bumps, but strategically they're going to be doing just fine, because their whole objective this entire time was to make sure that people have an alternative to health care that had nothing to do with Medicare. They did have a program that was built to mirror the effects of the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare, but they've left themselves enough wiggle room where they will be just fine. And then when you look at their financials, yes, it has fallen in terms of stock price. It has fallen $1.25, and it is worrisome, because they have been going down ever so slowly since their first quarter of this year, but they're also listed to have a very high chance of having sales increased, profits, and assets increase in the following years. So when looking at this perspective, growth is imminent, and investors have been quoting that they are not worried about this. And when I look at their dividend history, they have, from what you can tell, dividend payments have been on time. They have, except for the incident that happened in 2007, and it is reflected in their financial statements. But since then, and since they've had a different change in leadership, it has turned around quite respectively. And you can also look and see that their stock splits, they have not had one since 2005. With that being looked into, it kind of builds your confidence in how they've been managing in the past few years. Now, one more point I wanted to touch on. This particular market